Hi everyone, my name is Ahmed, and we'll be talking to you about how to ace your developer interview. And with me, I have Lynda.
Hi, I'm Lynda and I work as a software developer. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about how to ace your technical interview with Ahmed today. We're going to be talking about mostly how to ace your virtual technical interview, because that's the format of a lot of technical interviews, or at least some of the stages of your technical interview today.
Typically, it's for whoever is going through a job interview process at the moment. If you want to understand what tips could be helpful for you to ace your interviews, if you're also planning to interview in the nearest future, I think this video is for you.
So I've personally had a lot of interview experiences. I've just done a number of interviews, and over time I've learned some of the things that are great to do for an interview and some of the things that you should absolutely not do in an interview. And I just feel like I've had some experience. Of course, more experience is always good. I'm probably going to have more experiences, but I think I've come to learn some useful things that I could share today.
So this video is divided into 3 parts majorly. The first one is preparing for your interview, what are the things to do, how to get ready for the interview. And the second part is where we discuss actual interviewing. That is what kinds of things to expect when you're interviewing. And the last part is about what happens after the interview. What are the things you do and what are the things you don't do after an interview. So preparing for the interview. For technical interviews, you want to make sure you're practicing a lot of coding tasks. So you have platforms like HackerRank, CodeWars that can help you go through different programming challenges. And the good part is they are also organized by different levels. So depending on the kind of interview you're taking or depending on the kind of experience your job requires, you can see a lot of programming questions and tasks that can help you out. And the good thing about this platform is you can see solutions from other people who have taken the similar questions, and you can see how they solve theirs, even if you got a wrong answer or your answer is not as efficient as theirs is.
Well, another thing that is great to do before your interview in the preparation phase is to find out all you can about the company, find out all you can about the culture of the company, find out what you can about the person who is going to be interviewing you. And then the reason you want to do this is to become comfortable with the company, comfortable with the idea, know something, have a basis for the interview. And while finding out about the company and while finding out about the company's culture, you also want to make sure that you have your profile ready, because you are going to get questions about yourself, the work you've done, and your interest or your skills. So you want to have those things ready. And it always seems like you can answer from your head, like it's fine, I already know it. But when you are in an interview, you can actually forget things you already know. So it's good to prepare for them and have them ready for when you get asked. Another thing to do when preparing for your interview is you catch up on the basics that you maybe already knew but have forgotten or didn't even know. So it's all about practice, but practice the things that you know will be asked, and practice the things that you know you should know.
What kind of basics are you talking about, Lynda?
Basics in like fundamentals of programming, data structures, and some algorithms. Definitely helpful, especially the ones that have to do with improving efficiency when you are writing code or when you are dealing with code. These are definitely helpful to know, because most questions that have to do with algorithms and data structures will revolve around you understanding them and their use cases.
Lynda just talked about things to do a couple of days before your interview. And leading to the interview, let's say a couple of hours or minutes to the interview, what you want to do is make sure you are in an environment that is conducive for the call. You want to make sure there is a good internet connection, you have a very good audio source, you look nice on the call, and you do a sound check. I mean, I've seen cases whereby interviewers have rejected candidates and their only reason is because the candidate did not do enough to strengthen their internet connection or to be audible on the call. So those are things, I mean, you might have skills, but then you are talking to somebody who's meeting you for the first time or the second time, right? You want to always make a good impression. You also want to make sure that whenever you are on a call, you kill every source of interactions. Your Slack notifications, your phone should not be ringing. These are things that could easily distract you when you're talking, and when you get easily distracted, it's a problem to communicate to your interviewer.
Okay, so now let's talk about the different kinds of interviews that there are and different stages or types of interviews that you could get when interviewing. And okay, so the first screening or the first interviewing, it could be a phone call. So you could get a phone call and have to talk to a recruiter or an interviewer, and this phone call could be technical and also not technical. Really, I've usually seen it technical actually. I don't know. Ahmed, what's your experience with phone screening? Like that first initial phone call?
Usually, the person I talk to usually works in the HR department, but they still have some technical knowledge, right? Because what they want to do at that stage is they don't want to waste the time of their technical teams that are actually quite busy on building whatever product they're doing, right? Exactly. So they just want to filter out people as fast as possible.
It could also be a culture fit type of interview. I've definitely experienced that. So it would be more about you, like an informational, let's use informational, not culture fit, like an informational. So get information about you, but usually it's used for things like, does this person belong here? Another kind of first screening that you could get if you're using a job agency, for instance, is a technical test. And also informationals, but I guess my own experience is mostly technical tests that tests you and then basically puts you on to the next stage of your interviewing or recruiting.
Another form of interview is the coding test, which is probably my favorite, and I would say it usually comes in a couple of forms. You could have some companies ask you to solve a particular problem and push your code to a GitHub repo, where somebody on the team will look at the code, and based on that, they'll make a decision whether to proceed to the next step. With this kind of test, is usually at your own pace, although they probably give you a duration in terms of a number of days or weeks where you should spend on that particular test. This kind of test, whoever is reviewing will probably look at how well do you implement your solutions compared to what their engineers on their team know or what they currently do within their team, right? And because it's somebody who is looking through this code manually, there's a lot of ideas from how they currently do things whenever they are reviewing the code that you submit via GitHub. Usually, they ask you to probably create a private repo on GitHub or a private repo on Bitbucket, where you push your code and they review. One thing to note is some companies also take time to look at commits when they're actually reviewing this kind of work, right? So it's essential to actually know that when you're working on solutions that require you to submit via repos, you should make timely commits and make your commit messages make sense. Another form which I particularly don't like are time-based tests that happen on either HackerRank or Codility, whereby you have about 3 or 4 questions and you're asked to solve them between 1 or 2 hours, right? That gives me a lot of anxiety, right? Because there's a timer I'm looking at and I can't think straight that well. But then the good thing about this kind of test is when you practice a lot, which we talked about earlier in the pre-interview stages, you get used to having a timer brain while you still have to figure out how to best implement solutions. So there's always a mix of implementing short solutions for problems or answering theoretical questions. But then the major thing with this platform is they handle the submission in an automated way, whereby they validate your submissions against existing test cases. You can also write your own custom test cases to test for the solutions you've implemented. A lot of them focus on correctness. How correct is your solution? Some of them focus on performance, that is how efficient your solution is.
Another kind of interview that you could have would be a live coding interview. This, for me, is the most nerve-wracking in terms of all the types of interviews, but it also could be the most fun interview, depending on your interviewer and depending on too many factors. But essentially, you get to code live while the interviewer watches your screen. You obviously want to have great internet connection, and you want to be very vocal while you code, and you want to communicate your thoughts as you have them, because that's literally one of the most important things you can do in a life coding interview or in any interview where you have someone with you. You need to be out of your head more and like in the present and actually talk.
Yeah, I agree, because in this particular interview, what the interviewer is looking for is how do you think about problems, right? Can you actually communicate your thought process as a team member? So because you've probably passed through stages whereby they've checked for your technical competency and they're fine with that. At this point, they just want to know, is this somebody I would like to work with? Is this somebody I would like to pair program with when they get onto my team? So like she said, make sure you share your thought process and don't go mute. Have you ever had a technical interview or live coding session that went bad before, Lynda?
Yes, I have, but just one. Even though in an interview I'm typically not nervous for some reason, in that interview I was nervous before the interview. So I was just so anxious and so nervous before the interview. I guess there was just an incompatibility in terms of interviewee and interviewer. So that didn't help. And these were the two things that I recognized that made it bad. So by bad, I mean I got super anxious during the interview. I got stuck during the interview and I couldn't get out of it.
Also, I get the question. I usually get the question of, can I Google during a live coding interview? Lynda, what do you think?
In the ones that I've been in, there was no permission to Google. So there was no explicit permission to Google. And I feel like if there's no explicit permission to Google, like, oh, you can use Google, because then you may want to ask. You can ask. And also, it's not about memorizing, right? But if you are going to be going off your screen to Google something, then you want to communicate and be sure that that's okay before, I don't know. That's what I would do in any case.
Yeah, definitely. Communicating that fact is key, right? I think when you have to Google something from a documentation or Stack Overflow, it totally makes sense to tell your interviewer and say, oh, I want to check this thing up, right? Or do you mind if I check this up, right? I think it's only a very bad person will only ask you not to Google, right? Because I mean, that's what we do a lot of time as programmers, right? So it will be weird if the programmer says, oh no, don't Google, get it from your head.
Yeah. Okay, there's cases where when you Google that particular thing, it tells the interviewer, because you have different kinds of interviewers who evaluate you based on very different things. So if you Google certain things, it probably tells them something. And not everybody is open-minded enough to be like, yes, you can actually forget something like this. Doesn't mean you aren't good, but I don't know. I would say, like, for instance, if you are interviewing for a role that is, let's say you are a programmer, you program in so and so language, and there is a particular thing in that language that is maybe the most common thing, and then you don't remember it in the interview, and you have to Google it. Just looks bad. I know that can happen a lot, especially when you are super anxious and nervous, but could also look bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disclaimer that you should know. Whatever you Google shall and will be used against you when they are making the decision of if to hire you or not. I mean, that's absolutely something you should consider.
In the live coding interview, based on experience, use languages that you are very, very comfortable with. Don't use languages you are not comfortable with. It's just more fluid when you use something that you've practiced so much more, that even when you're anxious, it doesn't depart from you so fast, at least in most cases.
So generally, when you're interviewing or when you're in your live coding session, take note of feedback while interviewing, right? Because these are steps that helps you, number one, understand what your interviewer was looking for. Number two, understand what your team is looking for. That is your potential team you're about to join. And number three, it helps you improve as a developer too. Also, your interview, when you have that, ask about next steps after the interview, because number one, it helps you understand what the timelines are for the interviews, that is what to expect next, and also how to prepare for the next step if there's going to be a next step.
And one more thing or two more things to do is first project confidence. While obviously some people are more naturally confident and others aren't, learning to project confidence is useful for any person regardless of your personality. Learning to project the fact that you're confident in yourself and in your skills. I think everybody or most people, at least to an extent, have issues where they don't feel like they are confident in their skills, or they feel like, oh, I don't know so much, I'm really not that good, when you are actually that good. But it doesn't matter. In an interview, you definitely want to learn to be confident. In general, you also want to be able to talk from experience. So your experience is very important in an interview, and your perspective on that experience is even more important, and you will be evaluated based on all of these things. So it's not like you should just put them out there without being very thorough about what you are putting out there and the value that you know bringing this experience to the table brings. So if that wasn't clear, your interviews should have a lot of talk from your experience, and especially when you're asked about things people generally want to know you. So you talking about your experience gives them perspective on what you are like and how you react. Obviously, when you are doing this, you now need to know that you are going to be evaluated based on that, and you need to curate this, basically.
I totally agree. I mean, at the beginning of an interview, it's like you have a blank canvas, right? So it's left to you to paint whatever you want on the canvas and let your audience or whoever is looking at you or interviewing you see the best picture you can actually put up on the canvas. So your confidence and being able to talk from your experience definitely helps in painting the picture of yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so assuming that you've gotten through all the stages of an interview now, what happens after? How long do you wait before spamming your interviewers or spamming your recruiters? I personally think in the course of the interview, you should be very proactive about getting information about what the next stage is. And a lot more interviewers will be clear with you and tell you that they will contact you, or that if you don't hear from them, then it's over. But I guess you should keep the timelines that you got from them in mind and ask for feedback if you don't hear from them in that time.
Getting feedback, right, is something that is quite important in your interview process. I'm sure we've talked about it previously in this video, but it's good to reiterate on that point, right? Because it helps you understand how did you perform, what the team is looking for, and it also helps you make the decision of, do I really want to join this team? And also it helps you improve on your own skills, right? So feedback could be positive or it could be negative, right? And if you're getting positive feedback, you should probably use that to prepare for the next stage. And you should use that to actually understand the team you're trying to join. If it's negative, which is usually, oh, we are sorry, we cannot continue with you for XXXX reason. If they give you details on why they can't continue with you, I think that is something you can take with you and use that to prepare for other interviews or other roles. If they don't give you details, I think you should request for details, right? And tell, oh, what did I do wrong, or why did you make such decision, right? Some people will be happy to provide you feedback, and some people won't. But then I think it's a good step to ask, because the feedback will be helpful in your own career or in your own journey as a developer. I've seen people who have gotten negative feedback and would just like, oh yeah, I don't really care anymore. And when they get a rejection letter, they move on, right? I think it's helpful, based on my own personal experience, to actually engage whoever it is that is rejecting you on reasons why they are rejecting you, and use those reasons to improve.
It's very important to learn from any experience, and experiences like rejections are going to be painful sometimes, but the main thing to get from them is to learn from them. And depending on the stage that you are in the interview, if you're even like closer to the later stages, it's even more important to understand why you were rejected. So the whole interviewing process is not without its own flaws, but there are things that are similar across companies and across interviewing standards. And these things do not necessarily prove that, I don't know how to put it, they don't necessarily test the best things, or they don't necessarily test you as you should be tested. But learning these things by getting feedback will help you not fall into that trap again. It's really an advantage to get feedback from people. Thank you for watching this video. I'm going to be writing all of these that we talked about in a Medium post, and hopefully that will be out before or when this video is out, and we're going to link it in the description below. I also have a channel which is also going to be linked somewhere. I'm going to link it somewhere, and you should definitely check out my channel. And bye.